Okay, everybody, we have my next guest, Mando Sallavanti. Welcome, Mando.
Jeff, appreciate you having me, man. And perfect pronunciation of that Italian
All
name.
right.
Yeah, I got to give you kudos for
All
that.
right. I got a little Italian in me, a little Italian in me. But listen, I'm really excited to have you. For anybody who's listening in, um, I'm just going to let everybody know that I had you as a guest at my firm the other day, and you spoke about your career and what you're doing and the impact you're making on other people, and it was just a treat and a privilege to have you here and have my younger guys. When I mean someone, I don't just mean young in age, but just young in the business, listening to you and the successes that you're having in the business, which we'll talk about. But I just want to publicly tell the world, hey, thanks for coming, and I appreciate you taking the time and driving almost 2 hours or whatever from where you live to see us, which was great.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome and my pleasure.
Great. So I got a lot of questions to ask you, and I don't know where to start sometimes because I get so excited about what to talk about. But you're a former college athlete, and that's what this podcast is all about, is to have athletes come on and tell their story. And I met you through social media, right? And which is a big thing we'll talk about, and saw your background, your story about your personal life, your athletic life, and then into your professional life. And I said, man, I got to have this guy on. I got to talk to this guy. I got to meet this guy. I just got to get to know this guy, you know. So my first question, is well, is tell people a little bit about you. Where you're from. And the first thing is what inspired you to play, college sports?
So I'm born and raised in Old Forge, Pennsylvania, which is the self-proclaimed pizza capital of the world.
All right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not because we necessarily have the best pizza in the world. It's really good, but it's a marketing ploy, and I love everything about that for a lot of reasons. But I was born and raised there. I live in Moosic, Pennsylvania now. It's Northeast Pennsylvania, and growing up, I had a great childhood, man. I mean, my parents are awesome. My mom stayed at home, took care of us. My father's a family doctor. He was my first hero, and I just looked up to him, wanted to be just like my dad because when you wake up on Christmas every year and there's presents under the tree and summer rolls around and you go on a vacation with the family every year and it's a pretty good life. So I go through school. I get to high school. I'm going into college, and it was my identity that I was going to be a doctor, go pre-med into college, and go through school, get to med school, walk into my dad's practice, take it over from him, and learn from him. I mean, an amazing mentor to have, someone that's been doing it almost 30 years, and it was set. All I had to do was show up and execute. But I get to college. Fortunately, football was successful in high school, and I had some attention from mainly Division II schools to play in college, and a lot of Division IIIs, but there was a few Division II schools I was considering. I went to East Stroudsburg initially in Pennsylvania. They're a Division II school in the PSAC conference,
Mhm.
and I'm pre-med. Football's going very well. They wanted to redshirt me because all of our linebackers were juniors. Two of them were all conference guys. And I was able to get myself to second on the depth chart, but they're like, hey, dude, we want to redshirt you. We just think it'll be better for your long term, and we'll figure it out next year. Now, for me, Jeff, I was looking to be on an accelerated pre-med track. So I'm like, look, guys, I'm not staying 5 years. I'm pre-med. I'm going to med school. I know I'm not going to the NFL. I mean, I'm a 5'11" linebacker, for crying out loud.
Right.
This isn't for me. And they weren't receptive to that. So that kind of put a sour taste in my mouth. The season went on. I failed 2 classes my first semester in school.
Mm.
So then once I got to that point, I'm playing football and I realize I'm probably not going to the NFL. I got to get my act together. And I transferred home to King's College and played football at King's and got my act together. Ended up realizing that being a doctor wasn't for me. And I still wanted to play football. And back to the point, like, why did I want to get into athletics? Why did I want to do that in college? Something about athletics that I loved so much, even though I knew I wasn't going to be in the NFL. When you can set out, work hard, go in the gym, go on the field, do your field work, have the right nutrition and take care of your body. And you're not the guy at the bar every weekend because you care about your performance. And then see that result every fall for those 10 weeks or however long your season goes on. There was nothing more fulfilling than that for me as an athlete. And I wanted to hold on to that as long as I could, quite frankly. And that's really what drove me to play athletics in school.
That's awesome. So can we go backwards for a second?
Yeah,
You,
yeah.
you mentioned you had the courage to tell the world, which, most people don't have the courage to do this, but hey, I failed 2 classes. How did you handle that? How did your dad be, hey, pre-med, your dad's a doctor, the pressure of that, hey, dad, unless you didn't tell him, unless he didn't look, I don't know, but I would imagine you probably told him. How did you handle that? How did you rebound from that?
It was tough because I was the guy that school came easy to. And it was a blessing and a curse, right? Because in high school, I mean, just to put in perspective here, I was a high honors student. I actually was being sent to take competitive chemistry exams
Oof.
to nationally place myself and put my school on the radar around the country. And I don't even think that's anything I've ever talked about publicly, honestly. But just like to put in perspective, and mind you, I didn't take books home ever. It just like came to me. Like that's just how I was. So now I get in school and I fail 2 classes and my other ones are C's and B minuses. My parents are like, "What are you doing? Like,
Mm,
what is going on here?" And it wasn't like they did, it wasn't the pressure that they put on me necessarily. They were mad at me for sure. I'm the luckiest kid in the world, and my dad and mom paid for my school. So they're like, look, you're gonna figure this out, or else we're not paying anymore. So as a 19-year-old, now I'm like, oh my God, am I throwing my life away? And meanwhile, my sister's 4 years older than me. She was through school, she graduated successfully, dean's list, off doing her thing. So now I'm like, I'm a problem child. Like, what am I doing here? So back to the pressure point, I want to make a point on this. I never felt pressure from my parents to be anything or do anything, but growing up, everybody called me Doc. Everybody knew
mm.
I was the doctor's son. Everybody expected me to become my dad and to become a doctor. And really, that was the pressure I felt. My entire identity was wrapped up in it. So when I transferred to King's, I got my grades back together in that second semester, which was good. But then I realized, like, exactly what I just said, quite frankly. I don't want to be a doctor. I wanted to have the impact in the life that my dad gave to me as a kid, and I wanted to do that for my future family. But it didn't need to be through medicine. It didn't need to be that way. And I was living a life that was driven by the projections on myself of others based on what looked good. Because let's really think about this. Become a doctor, have good grades, go through, have your life. It sounds amazing, but it sounds amazing until it isn't, because you can't live a life that's driven by other people's projections onto you. And that really forced me to reflect at the moment.
Wow. It's amazing how our past can turn that quick, right? So let's before we keep moving forward, which is with so many things we can talk about. College sports, if I know you probably had a ton. What's the most special moment that stands out for you?
The most special moment that stands out for me in college, for sure, man. At King's, we had every school has their rival, and ours was Wilkes University because King's College, we're in Wilkes-Barre. Wilkes is in Wilkes-Barre as well. We're a mile
Right
apart
there.
from each other. So that was like our rival. And they, my second year at King's, it was my redshirt sophomore year. They were better than us for sure that year as a team. We were banged up. We had a lot of injuries. but week 10 we always played. It was rivalry week, and they were playing us for a chance at a bowl berth. And we went in there even with guys injured, and I was actually injured too. I had a bad ankle injury. I mean, this is probably as bad of an injury I had to this point, where I wasn't supposed to play and I played anyways. And, we won 45 nothing.
Mm.
And nobody saw that coming. It was incredible. I remember in the game I had 2.5 sacks. It was one of my better games of the year, and I was playing hobbled. It was off pure adrenaline, but it was just one of those games that you remember forever, because like guys smiling, and you're just having fun playing the game. And it's the stuff that when you see guys at your wedding or someone else from the team's wedding, it's like that's the game you talk
Yeah.
about. And it didn't matter what happened the entire rest of our career besides a game like that.
You're going to talk about that game forever.
Forever. I
Yeah.
remember. I remember every drive. It seems like,
Right.
and I remember we were up 45 nothing, and they had the ball, and we're on defense, and I lit a kid up, and me and one of our corners, I celebrated after the play, and it was definitely excessive, but the clock was running out. They throw a flag, and we're all just
Oh,
like
nuts.
we laugh about that exact thing, that penalty to this day. Once a year, it'll come up in like a Snapchat memory that he has, and he's like
That's
texting
great.
about it.
And now, was that at their field or at yours?
It was at their field, which made it even better.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. How was that bus? Because you probably took a bus, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How was the bus ride back?
Oh, well, it was, well, actually, it's funny. It was so close, and the way that it worked, so I actually drove to the game. I don't remember why I drove to the game. I, I do actually, because of my injury and the issue I was having. I had to have something done with the trainers before that we couldn't necessarily do once we got over there. And again, like we're literally a 5 minute drive from them for perspective. So I drove over there with the bus after, um, and then just driving back, just being with everybody on campus.
Yeah.
And the things I remember most from college, whether we won or lost, when it's after the game and the dust settles, and you had a noon game, and it's 5 o'clock, and getting to be the evening, and everyone's together at someone's apartment, and
Yeah.
you're just watching the other college games that are on TV. And like those are the moments that seem so inconsequential at the time, that like you'd just kill to have one
Yeah.
more day like that.
They become the most special,
Yeah.
right? So going, let's stay focused on that for a second, and then we'll keep moving. But as far what did you learn the most from college sports football, that lessons you learned that helped propel you into your professional life?
This is so easy for me. And I have texted my coaches and told them about this so many times, because what do you hear when you're playing sports growing up and then even into college, Jeff? Oh, all the life lessons you're going to learn are better than anything from this. And when you're in it, you hear that and you're like, yeah, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
like for sure, like you get it, but at the same time you don't really get it. Time management in and especially in college, that is probably the thing that differentiated myself from someone who didn't do it that came into this career. Because day one, my mentor, Timmy, he told me, he's like, number one thing that's going to lead to your success as a financial advisor is to be meticulous with your calendar. Everything needs to be in there. When you eat, when you drive, when you do whatever, anything you're doing, personal life included, needs to be in your calendar. And I bought into it and got it from day one, because what did college athletics look like? They give you a paper,
Yeah.
6:15 gym, 7 o'clock breakfast, 7:45 offensive meetings and defensive meetings, 8:15 this, and like your whole day
Yeah.
when
It's
you get
mapped
to
out.
training camp, it's all mapped out for you. And in season it would be the same thing. Hey, meetings are at 4 after classes, practices at 6, we have film at this time, whatever it is, it's all mapped in there. So I was just used to that life. And then you add in the fact of like, just a quick plug for this, the 5 a.m. and the 6 a.m. workouts that you're kind of forced to do, especially at the Division 3 level, like you have to share weight rooms with other teams. So we were forced into 5 a.m. workouts and 6 a.m. and we really couldn't do any other time. But that trained me to be an early riser. And I
Hmm.
think being an early riser now as a professional, I get so much done from 5 a.m. to like 9 a.m. That's my time. Like that is me time. That's when I'm just going. And
Yep.
time management and that piece, just totally attribute that to sports. And it's the most valuable thing I got from it.
That's great. I mean, it's so important in life to have that schedule mapped out, but having it under control. And you know what I have found, and obviously I'm light years ahead of you out of college, right? And I have found that two things happen to college athletes when they get out of school. It's they conform to that schedule and they live it, they breathe like you, they live it, they breathe it, they own it, and it becomes them, and their success path just takes off. Or there's guys who you know who they are without naming names, who fought it, didn't want to follow it, were always late, always an issue, always a concern, always a problem. They get out of school and they're like, heck with that. I'm not doing that. I don't need that. And their trajectory goes the other way, and it's like anything. If you take structure, you take the game plan and you own it, you live it, you breathe it, your trajectory can only go up, that's awesome. So what advice can you give to aspiring high school seniors about transitioning from high school to the college athletic world and the differences in between?
I think what you need to realize, no matter what level you play at, and this was a punch in the mouth for me when I transferred to Kings, being a Division 3 school, because I think, a lot of kids think Division 1 or bust. And even Division 2, Division 3, every player on the team was still the best player on their high school team. And that's what you forget, regardless of the level. And I got the Kings thinking like, okay, I was about to be playing at this Division 2 school as a freshman. I'm going to be walking in here, taking my spot. I don't even need to compete with these guys. This is going to be cake for me. And I had to punch and claw my way to get what I got. And I realized the level of competition every single week on the football field, because you're once a week. Even that, you got to be on your stuff every play,
Yep.
because everybody on that field is a stud. And
Yep.
I think whatever sport you play, whether it's basketball, baseball, hockey, football, whatever, everyone you go against at every level is bringing their best and they're a stud. And if you don't bring your best, you could be knocked off at any second.
Yep.
And the lesson in general to that is you got to treat yourself personally, athletically, and if you move on to your career professionally and academically, of course, which ties into professionally, like a professional athlete treats themselves. Like I think of myself now as like a business athlete. I forget where I first heard that term, but when I heard it, I was like, "Oh my God, this is so good. I love that." But you have to take yourself seriously, and I think a lot of high school students, not that they don't take themselves seriously, but I didn't. Like I felt like I had all the time in the world as a high school student and there was so much ahead of me, and I don't really need to have a sense of urgency, and I worked hard, but at the same time, there wasn't a sense of urgency there behind what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I think if you can keep a sense of urgency behind what you're doing, be early for things, do what you say you're going to do, work harder than the person that you see next to you, and compete with yourself every single day. If you could do those three things, you're going to put yourself in a very good position.
Awesome. I mean, that's great advice. But I want to touch on what you said before about everyone's a stud, right? You show up, you're like, if you think you're going to be the man, you're going to be the stud. Hey, there's no right, and you walk in like, oh my god, I can't believe all these kids are good. And you're right, almost all of them are probably one of the better players on their high school team. So that's challenge number one, stressor number one, mental challenge number one. How about this? The next year you show up, right? And now you're thinking, okay, I got my spot. I'm the regular guy. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to kill it. And then the coach says, well, we just recruited these three other studs that are here to be in your position. And now it's like, wait a minute. I thought I was the guy. I'm the man. And you go and you recruit. Why'd you recruit them? but their job is to out recruit you and to win. How did you handle that stress of every year having to show up prepared and ready to go, knowing that there's going to be some other guys coming in that are just as good, if not better than you, and you got to keep that spot?
And not only that, how about the guys who might have been quote unquote nobodies on the team the year before that crush it in the offseason and all of a sudden they're coming for your spot because
Right.
that I think that even is a huge
Yeah.
one. That I saw guys on our team come out of nowhere and become all conference players that even the guys on the team were like, man, we never expected him to be who he
Yeah.
was, but he's a killer out there. So that stress definitely is there, and it's very tough, especially when, you know, position coaches. I think this is another piece of that stress. You might have a position coach who you jive amazing with, and all of a sudden as a coach, you're trying to advance your career and get a new job, and it usually comes with going to a new
Yeah.
school. So you're not at the same place often on the position coach level. So now you have a new position coach almost every year.
Yeah.
And do you jive with the new guy that comes in? Does he like you? Are you in line with the play style of the player that he wants compared to who you had before? And when that happens, there's all these forces at play that, you know what, Jeff? Every single day, the scoreboard starts at zero, no
Zero.
matter if you're an athlete, no matter if you're a professional, no matter if you're a student. And you got to get up, you got to prove yourself. And this is probably the best lesson I learned in college football that translated to life as a financial advisor. No one cares about what you did yesterday. They wrap yesterday's paper is what they wrap the fish with, my
Yeah.
mentor told me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to wake up, you got to bring your stuff, and you might be known as a disciplined guy. You might be known as a hardworking guy. But guess what? You're only that guy if you do it today.
It's so true. And I don't think a lot of athletes understand that and really understand the fact that what's important is tomorrow, not what happened today or yesterday. It's what are you going to do tomorrow, right? Which is big. So let's talk about on campus. Let's talk about as an athlete, everybody knows who you are, right? For the most part. And there's some students out there that are, let's say, for lack of better words, the traditional student. And they say, oh, look, Mando gets things handed to him. Oh, Mando gets everything. Oh, Mando gets privileges. Mando, the athletes, they're spoiled. They get wherever they want. And how did that happen? If so, how did you handle it? How did your buddies handle it? And what are your thoughts around that? Because my opinion is, hey, just show up and put my cleats on for one day and see if you come back tomorrow. And they usually
Yeah.
won't. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, there was a little bit of it for sure. What was great about being at King's College, I felt that the staff on the academic side, so our professors and other educators and even up to the administration of the college, they were so supportive of the athletic programs, which I think is huge because there's a lot of schools out there that I don't think that really is the case a lot of times, especially on campus in the academic side. And our coach, it was Division III football, so we knew guys weren't going to the NFL. So there was a big emphasis on academics, and your academics could be the reason that you weren't going to be the guy on the field. You want to screw off in class, you want to not get the job done there. How could we depend on you to get the job done inside the lines when it's 4th and 2 and we need a big stop inside the goal line? Like that's the way our coach looked at things, and I'm very grateful. Like shout out to Coach Nar. If you're, what, I'm gonna send this to him after it's published, just because I'm shouting him out. But to Coach Nar's credit, who was my head coach in my years at Kings, he's so focused on, I want you to be a great athlete and I want to have a successful year. And of course, he's incentivized to do that because he's a head coach and he's measured by wins and losses. But with him, nothing came at the detriment of us becoming men and being better than we were that the day that our parents dropped us off. And he preached that. And you know what, Jeff? Like me and Coach Nard definitely butted heads and had our battles throughout then. But as time went on, I learned to appreciate him. After college, he's been nothing but supportive. Anytime I needed him for something or texted him for something, he was there to help me. He answered the phone, he picks it up, and there's no reason he had to do that, right? Like, I'm not one of his players anymore. I'm not there. And just a great guy. And I think it stemmed with him when you talk about the academic dynamic on campus. He set a very good precedent with our athletes to not be the guy who, hey, I get things because I'm an athlete, and it's you're just like any other student, and it was a humbling thing to experience that was for the better for sure.
I mean, that's a sign of a great coach, Mondo, is if a coach is concerned about you after the game, who's willing to support and help and give to you after the game, that's not just a coach. That's a leader. That's a mentor. That's somebody who cares. Which is great. There's not a lot of, and there's great coaches out there that do all that, but a lot of them are just worried about what? Winning.
Yeah.
So that's great. So how about injuries? I know you mentioned before your ankle. How did you handle that? Was it where you played with it through your 4 years, 5 years of playing? What was it something that came and went? And how did you handle that mentally?
So it's funny. The ankle injury was a one-time thing. I never had issues with it. We were playing one of the top 10 teams in the country, and I was chasing down the running back, made a tackle. One of their linemen kind of came in to hit me, but I was a little quicker than he thought, and I made the tackle, but he rolled up on my leg. I thought I broke my leg at the time. It was that bad, but it ended up being an ankle thing. Fortunately, there was no breaks. There was tendon damage and whatnot. But the big thing for me, Jeff, was actually my shoulder. Um, Back to high school, I had issues since my junior year in high school with my right shoulder and rotator cuff problems, AC joint problems. I didn't know it then, but in college, I probably found this out at the end. Labrum problems. I never missed a game as long as I played junior football slash Pop Warner football, freshman football when I was in middle school, high school football, college football. I missed the last game of my career in college football.
Mm.
It's the only game I ever missed. I didn't know it was going to be my last game. But back to injuries. This shoulder thing was an issue my freshman year of college. We kind of got it under wraps, and it was less of an issue my sophomore year, redshirt sophomore, than redshirt junior year, which would end up being my last year unknowingly. I had a play in our second game where running back makes a catch on a check down. I'm coming up to tackle him. He kind of spins out. My shoulder hits him as he's spinning out. And I knew something was wrong in that second game. Like you get hurt, you
No,
know it
you know.
instantly. I knew it. And I was devastated because that was like, I was on All American watch lists that year for Division 3 and small school, getting grouped together with D2. And game one was great. Game two, I was having a great game again. And I'm like, no, like this can't happen. Like I put on this weight. I got so much stronger. I was on the field on 100-degree days. Like this can't happen. Like there's no way. And I was, you know what? Like I was in denial. I really was in denial. I didn't tell the trainers. I didn't really tell
Mm.
anybody. I just said like, hey, I have this little tweak. I played down how big of a deal it was. It got worse as the season went on, and I was getting help. I didn't miss a game. I played every single game that year. Game 9, we're playing a home game, and it was our senior day because it was our last home game, and with or homecoming maybe, I don't know, whatever. I was having a career day. First half, I had 13 tackles, 3 for loss. I had a sack, I had an interception, all in the first half, which is like career high in tackles for a game. And I did it in the first half. Other stats were filling up the stat sheet. And third quarter, we come out. They had a big running back. He was more of a bruiser type of deal. The hole opens up. It's a gap run. I'm a Mike linebacker. I come to fill the hole. I hit him, tackle him, passed out on the field.
Mm.
I actually thought I was paralyzed, which looking back to that day is very scary because I hit him and I don't have the film of it, but if you look at the film, I could see it in my mind. I hit him, you see me go limp, and I'm just on the field and everybody's screaming, calling out for the trainers. So I remember coming to and I was blacked out on the field, wake up, and I couldn't really move for a couple seconds, but then I realized it was my shoulder. Now, this was week 9. Week 2, I had this original injury. What I learned later happened. I tore my labrum.
Mm,
As the season went on, I fully tore it. And because it was fully torn, there's a small bone in your shoulder called the glenoid that was exposed, and it would not normally be exposed if your labrum was intact. When I made this hit on this running back, I fractured my glenoid on impact. And whether it was that hit that did it or it built up to that, maybe, but that did it. And I guess the pain from that caused me to pass out on the field. And the next week was our last game versus our rivals. I didn't play in that game. I was anticipating to come back for my senior year next year, and I figured, you know what, I gotta make the right choice here. First game I ever missed ended up being my last game ever, and my last season was canceled due to the pandemic with
right.
COVID. And I got labrum surgery. I fought to come back and recover, and I did, and I got myself back into playing shape in July of 2020. And in July of 2020, a month before camp, that was when we were told there wouldn't be a season. So, you know, I know we're focusing injuries here, but just the last point, I had a tough choice to make on, am I going to hang up the cleats and go out on my terms, or am I going to go back for a 6th year and off of an injury that I just got major surgery that, by the way, the doctor told me 12 to 18 months was the minimum recovery, and I was back to full strength in 6. Was I going to risk that? And if I go now, my dad was not going to pay for it. So I take 30,000 of loans. I give up a year of income, which I was conservatively saying, hey, I'll make 40 grand. So now that's $70,000 I'm taking backwards, starting my career and my life to play one more year of football. Well, you got to hang the cleats up at some point, and I
Right.
figured I'm going to go out on my terms.
It was probably the best decision you ever made.
It was. It
You
truly
know.
was. And it was hard at the time. I remember bawling my eyes
Yeah.
out when I had to make the decision.
Well,
But, those cleats up there, and I probably never even told anybody this. I know this is a audio only podcast, but for those of you listening, there's a pair of cleats over my shoulder. I actually had them made custom with an artist and a cleat designer for my last season before I knew. And they're kind of my, keepsake from my football career. Never got to put them on and wear them, but everything happens for a reason. And I've seen that over the
yeah.
last 4 years.
Some nice looking cleats. That would have been cool to wear those out there on the field, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you handle that, Mondo? And is what I don't know how you guys who dealt with the COVID, the pandemic, canceling of seasons or reduced seasons. At least there was some point where if you weren't hurt, you take your helmet off for the last time, and it's coming off for the last time. You didn't know that was happening. You figured, hey, I'm going to rehab. I'll come back. Right? How did you handle once you realized? You said before you were balling, but it's like it was your identity just like stripped away. Like, hey, man, I'm a college athlete, linebacker, crushing it here, and all of a sudden it's over, and you weren't even preparing for that. They told you it was over because the season was canceled. Like, how did you handle that?
And then there's like the big things where, when it's your senior year, you get the senior day and you get all the recognition for that stuff. Like I never got any of that.
Yeah,
And that time I passed out on the field and I took my helmet off, that was the last time ever. And I didn't realize it then. And I didn't play the next game and I didn't have another training camp and I didn't have another anything. And, I had that shoulder injury. I got surgery. I fought all the way back. Then I'm where I need to be and the season's canceled and it's taken away from me. And I'm like, why is everything just going against me right now? I was supposed to have my amazing All-American season, and I was an all-conference player in that junior year, but that wasn't my standard. My standard was I'm here to be All-American. That was what I came to do, and that didn't happen because I was injured all season. I was still able to play well enough with the injury, but still, and now the pandemic thing, and now I had to get surgery, and I'm just like, God, like, what are you trying to tell me here? What are you trying to tell me? And that pandemic year, it was the best thing for me. And it was probably the biggest year of growth I've ever had in my life because it forced me to find a new identity and other things. And I always collected sneakers. I love sneakers. I love Nikes, Jordans, all things like that. I started a little side business from my college apartment. I was selling them, buying them, reselling rare shoes and whatnot. And that was like my first lesson in entrepreneurship. I'm like, oh, I like this business thing. This is cool. And at the same time, I'm interning as a financial services intern, and I won an award for top young advisor in the making in the internship. And then all this good stuff's happening, and the season gets canceled. And I'm like, everything, everything with football is going against me. Like everything else outside of football is amazing. And I'm just like, God, what are you trying to tell me? And when I really reflected, when I really looked at things, I'm a man of faith. I'm Catholic, and I'm like, I gotta trust in God here. He is pointing too many things in my life away from football and trying to tell me that I have a bigger purpose than putting on the pads and getting in between the lines every Saturday.
It's awesome. So it sounds like, as your football career was coming to a close, not by choice, right? Just by everything. Was there any burnout in there? Mental burnout? Well, hey, you know what? I'm at the point now. I'm just burning out from all these things going on, and it's just time to push the button and move on.
There was Jeff to like now. I still work out. I keep myself in good shape. I love lifting weights. It's the center of my life. I work out every day. I don't work out every day because I'm just like, oh, I want to look good. Obviously, I want to look good. I want to be in shape, but it is a release for me. I love it. I genuinely enjoy doing it. But with football, every time you're in the gym, how do I be 5 pounds stronger than last week? How do I get a bigger lift than this guy I'm competing with? That I loved about it. I loved the competition. But when it's every time you work out, it really does get old and it gets very difficult. And then you add this to the fact, you know, going out to bars and going on trips and having alcohol involved with stuff, it doesn't, you don't necessarily need that to have fun, but the reality is when you're in your 20s, a lot of times bars and other things like that and parties, alcohol is involved, and when you're in that environment, it's very hard not to be consuming it when you're with a lot of people that do. So with my fiance, then girlfriend, there'd be parties and there'd be events and there'd be things that we wouldn't go to because I'm like, look, Mattia, like I'm really focusing on football. I can't be consuming alcohol often. I can't be doing it really more than once a month, honestly, at most. Because then if I do that, now that affects my weight room progress. That affects my weight room progress. Now I lose an entire month of lifting. And I only have so many months to train to get myself into training camp shape and really get myself better than the shape I was in last year. Because any athlete with football knows you get done in December, you're beat up. It takes you till about May just
Recover.
to get back to your baseline.
Yeah.
So now I'm at my baseline and I have June and July, the 2 months before camp, to hopefully get stronger and better than I was last year so I could be a better player on the field. So I was making sacrifices where I made a decision that I had 4 years to play football and I had my entire life that I could party if I wanted to. So when I got done with football, then there was a good year, maybe 6 to 9 months or so that I'm just like, I'm not lifting heavy weights. I'll work out when I really feel like it. I'll go to bars on the weekend. I'll take the trips. I'm not really going to dial my nutrition in. And I balanced it for sure, but it got to a point probably after 6 months or so, 9 months or so, that I'm like, all right, man, you gotta get back to who you are. It's not, you can't fall off the wagon here in terms of discipline. Like, yeah, you had so much that it was just 24/7, 365. You had to be in that football mode, but you got to take the good from that. And you got to accept that you could have fun sometimes,
Yeah.
but there's a time and a place for it.
So what do you miss the most? It's been a couple of years, you're out of school. What do you miss the most about college sports?
I went to our running back. He got married last year in April, and we probably had 40 guys from the team that were there. And it's amazing. Last year, when I saw these guys, a lot of them was the first time I saw them in 4 years, and definitely first time in 4 years that all of us were together. And being in that environment with all the guys, and it's like you never missed a beat. It's like you never missed anything. But just being around, everybody's there. You could bust each other. You could laugh about things. You could talk about what happened in the games. The camaraderie, and it's cliche, but the camaraderie of it, just being around the guys, having that environment where that guy and those guys, they went through all that sucky stuff that you went through.
Yep.
They suffered and they worked hard through it. That there's just a level of respect and connection that you can't get with anyone else for any other reason. That it's like a subconscious bond that you get knowing that guy did that with you.
It's a brotherhood, and you hear these guys, fraternities, and which are all cool stuff, right? But you can't explain the camaraderie, the synergy, the likability, the brotherhood, the family of a college athletic team. I don't care what sport it is, but what football is probably the most physically intensive sport out there. I know there's some other stuff that are pretty tough, like lacrosse, but football, man, you're getting pounded out there day in and day out, and you got to get up the next morning and ice it up, you tape it up, wrap it up, and go out there and do it again and do it again and do it again. And I don't think that the traditional student, for lack of better words, understands the bond that creates. Even if you're losing,
Yeah.
if your team's losing, you forget the losses when it's over, but you don't forget the summer camps. You don't forget, like you said, the 5 a.m. workouts. You don't forget the weight room. You don't forget watching your buddies go down with an injury, and you're like, oh my God. Or what, and then you go down and the camaraderie, they help to try and pull you back, like, oh my God, they're there for you, standing next to you. Those are things like just like they're incredible, and then you're feeling that today. It's only 4 years out, right? That you've been done, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
40,
2019 was my last
all
season.
right, 40 years from now, you'll still be feeling the same stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really a great feeling to have, and I would say you haven't met some of your best friends yet until you go to college and play football.
There's something about football, and I'm biased because I was a football player, but I think you can't replicate the bond that happens in a football locker room because it's the one sport where you are literally risking your life on that field every single time you go
Yeah.
out there. And how many guys die on a football field? It's happened before.
Yeah.
It's not like it's common by any means. It's a fraction of a percent of people that
Yeah.
do.
But it
But
happens. It happens.
we all know, and we all knew that when we went out there and we played football for 4 years, and we were pounding, and you're taking hits from 250 pound, 300 pound guys every play. We knew that our bodies were paying a price for that we will feel later in our life, most likely. And additionally, like, this is another thing as college kids that you sacrifice those 3 weeks in August that you give up. And now all your friends, by the way, are at home partying, and
Yeah.
they're on the lake, and they're going on trips, and you see this stuff, but you're in a dorm room, and 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night is mapped out for you. And when you're done, it's go to sleep, which college football camp could literally be compared to being in jail, which choosing to be in jail, obviously, if
Right.
you will. But you're 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., whatever the schedule of the specific school is, and that's your life, and that's what
Yeah.
you do, and there's nothing outside of it. And those are the only guys you talk to, and you go through that together. That
Yeah.
there's nothing that can replicate that.
Yeah. Which is phenomenal. So now, again, I could talk about your college life for the next 3 hours, but I don't want to do that because it will take up too much time. But now let's talk about transitioning out of sports, right? Football's over. Your identity, you take the helmet off for the last time, even though you didn't know you were doing it. But now it's off. Now you realize it's off. How did you shift your identity from your athletic world to your professional world?
This was difficult, but the best advice that I got from my mentor Timmy on this specific thing, because I said to him, I'm like, Timmy, like I'm a 22-year-old kid. Sure, I have these licenses and passed these tests to be a financial professional, and I have a degree in finance, but everyone's just going to view me as Mando, that football player, Mando, that kid, Mando, the linebacker. And really, Jeff, like that's how it was because everyone in my network knew me as like, you're a linebacker, you're a linebacker, you're a linebacker. That's who you are. He said, kid, the only way, and he always calls me kid, even to this day. He said, kid, the only way you're going to do that is you got to make people look at you in a different way. You got to brand
Mm.
yourself in a different way. And I'm not really this guy now because I've definitely changed my perception. But he said, you got to be wearing nice suits. You got to be having your hair made up nice. You got to be talking a different level than you've talked before. Not to say don't be yourself. Be that version of you. Be yourself. But you need to be the buttoned up version of yourself so they stop looking at you as Mondo, who was the kid picking his nose at 8 years old or whatever. So something that I really fell in love with the concept of, Jeff, was reverse engineer who you want to be into today. So I looked at, okay, who are these top performing financial advisors and how do they carry themselves every single day? I'm going to do that. I'm going to dress like them. I'm going to talk like them. I'm going to act like them. And I'm going to copy everything they do until I could somehow make it into my own. And over the past 4 years, that's really what I've done. Now, I don't think it's perfect because there was some burnout in there. Like I definitely lost my identity a little bit and kind of felt like, all right, I might be attracting not necessarily the person that I could see myself working with for 40 years in terms of a clientele, but there were a lot of clients that helped me get off the ground. A lot of them were great clients. It was some of them, like I don't want to paint a picture that I don't like my clients. I love a lot of them. But that was what helped transition me out of it. And eventually it was like, dude, every time I see you, you have a suit on. Like, what's the deal? Every time I see you, you're dressed up nice. Like your hair is like, what's the deal with you? And there'd be days that quite frankly, I do it on purpose, even if I wasn't working, just to say, oh man, like I had a meeting this morning. Like, I just was coming from there. I didn't really have time to change. And it was with the sole intention, I am going to make people stop thinking of me as a linebacker and start thinking of me as this professional.
Mm. Wow, that's awesome. So, where did the inspiration come from? I know while you were in school, you said you did some stuff as with the advisory company, but when did it click? Hey, you know what? That's it. Where did the inspiration come from? The motivation to say, I'm going to be the financial advisor and I'm going to be the best one out there. Like, when did that start?
Well, my freshman year in school, when I got my grades back up and I decided that, pre-med probably wasn't the path for me and it was pushed on me by other people. I had that conversation with my dad and he was amazing about it. And he said, like, I don't care if you're a doctor. It's hard to be a doctor. I remember him telling me, he said, look, it's harder to go to medical school now than it was when I went. There's more competition than ever. I don't know that I even want to see you go through that. Not to say you can't do it, but just to say that I don't know how you're going to do it playing football, truthfully. And he was honest with me and he said that. But he said, look, you don't want to be a doctor, fine. Let's figure out what you're going to do, though. I have a good network. I'm going to hook you up on some phone calls. You're going to ask people about what they do, and you're going to figure it out. So he did that for me. And it was a great lesson in networking that if you ask people for help, they really will
Yeah,
help
they
you and they
want to
want
help.
to if you just ask. The first call I made, I was on the phone with the guy who does at the time, he's the head of marketing for the Washington Wizards and the New Jersey Devils. And I'm like, how am I on the phone with this guy right now as a 19-year-old kid? Like, I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. But I talked to him about marketing. And then the second call was to my dad's advisor, Timmy, who I mentioned as my mentor earlier. He's now one of my partners. I have three of them. Um, and talking to Timmy, he told me a story about a client that he worked with, and his client's name was Eli, and Eli was a referral to him. He has a meeting with Eli, and he's busting them, and they're going back and forth, and him and his wife Marianne became clients of Timmy, and years go by, and Timmy's telling me this story, and he says, "Look, one day I get a call from Eli. I pick it up. It wasn't him. It was Marianne. She says, 'Timmy, Eli's passed away.'"
Mm.
Okay, figure things out. What do you need from me? When do you need me to come over? What do we have to do? Timmy goes to the house. It's the scene where people are mourning. They're in another room. There's food. There's that whole 9 yards. And Marianne pulls him into another room. And Timmy's telling me the story. And he says, "Kid, I'm going to tell you what Marianne told me, and I'm going to apply it to where you are right now. There's three things we all think about before we go to bed. Number one, did I hurt anyone today? And if I did, I can go pray about it if I'm religious. I could go talk to a friend if that will help me clear my mind. Whatever I need to do to make sure I can go to sleep at night, okay. The second thing, am I healthy? Is my family healthy? And if they're not, and Timmy said to me, again, calling me kid as many times as he could, he said, "Kid, that's your dad. That's who people call when they're not healthy. That's who they call when they need the prescription, and he send it over to CVS or to Rite Aid and they go get it and they're okay." And the third thing we think about just before we go to bed, just before we put our head on the pillow, can I pay my bills tomorrow? Am I making the right money decisions? Am I setting my family up that years from now we're going to be okay? And when it comes to that, that's your money. That's a financial advisor. He said, "Kid, that's me." And when he told me that, he said, "That's who you could be. But you need to know who you want to be before you decide if you want to be the third thing people think about before they go to bed." And at that moment, I said, "Timmy, I don't know much about being a financial advisor, but the way you're talking, if it seems to me like I could impact people just like my dad does, but in a different way." And that's exactly what it was. And that moment was in January of 2017. It was a rainy night. I'm driving around in my car, talking to him on the phone. I remember it just like yesterday. And that was the pivotal moment that made me want to become an advisor.
That is a phenomenal story, and you're not the you're not the medical doctor. You became the financial doctor.
Mm-hmm.
That is so powerful, man. Now, when you were here the other day, you talked about I forget the scenario how you put it, but when I say it, hopefully you recall it and you can talk to it here. You talked about, investing time, investing in yourself, educating yourself. And you made a comment around, well, if you talk to a doctor, you say, "Well, how much time did you spend educating yourself?" And they said, "Well, not much." Well, would you use them? Remember that chat?
Right.
Talk about that, because I know I could, those who can't see the screen, I see all the diplomas, all this, everything on your walls, all the education you put yourself through, and I know you got your CFP in 12 months, and I like nobody in 4 years gets a CFP, let alone doing it in 12 months. So talk to that about the mental educational focus you put on yourself to be, so driven and so successful so young.
When I got into financial services, something I would hear often was invest in yourself, coaches, courses, like this is how you grow, this is how you do it. And my first year in business, it got to the point where I'd made a good chunk of money and I felt like I had some cash saved up, especially living at home at the time when I had no expenses, maybe $1,000 a month of expenses. And my coach then, he's still my coach now, actually. We work together ongoing. Simon Granner, he pitched me on LinkedIn. Like I didn't know this guy from Adam, and he pitches me, and he's a specific financial advisor coach, and he's going to help you grow your business and grow as an advisor. And I'm like, Jeff, I probably hired him from a place of insecurity that I was off to a hot start in my career, and I couldn't get out of my mind every night going to bed the anxiety of, am I cut out for this? Is this the career that I'm good enough to be in? Yeah, I've had some early success, but how am I going to replicate this? I don't know how I'm going to do what I just did for 7 months here or 8 months here and do it for the next 8 months and the next and the next. So I hire Simon. Long story short, that coaching engagement went very well. And from that moment on, I realized a major lesson that you pay for things in life in one of two ways. Every single time, no questions asked. It's time or it's money. So I could pay money like I paid to Simon at that time and learn from him, take his wisdom, what he's learned in not only his experience in his career as an advisor and coaching other advisors, but also how about the money he's paid other people to save himself time and learn those things from them. And now he's giving that back to me as my coach. I could lean into people like him and other coaches throughout my career to do that. Or I could just try to do it my own way, let myself fall on my face. Sure, I'm going to make mistakes no matter what, but I can make a lot more mistakes and learn with time. And I look back and probably some of those things he taught me just in that first year, never mind our coaching engagements moving forward, I probably would not have learned some of those things for 5 years, if not a decade, if not longer. And that was the first time I realized that. And since then, I've had multiple coaching engagements, multiple courses I've gone through, programs, certifications, stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, I've burned money for sure on some of them. Some of them were bad bets, they were bad choices. Definitely 5 figures worth of money that did not work out okay. But I still view it as good investments because it taught me how to identify a good versus a bad one. And also, if I wasn't willing to do that and not make a good one sometimes, I never would have met the good people who I worked with one on one.
That's awesome. So you have a great relationship with that guy.
Yeah, we meet weekly now. We're, texting and messaging every couple days besides that, if not every day. Um, we just started working together ongoing back in December until now, and like we're going to moving forward. We had done on and off like limited engagements in the prior 3 years, just on specific things, but now it's ongoing. We have a tremendous relationship. He gets my world, he gets me, he gets this business, and it just works out very well.
That's great. I hope that continues for a long time. So a couple more questions, and it's now you're entrenched in the financial world, killing it, for 4 years now. I see the book behind you, 12-week year, and we talked about time management as something, a big piece that you learned as a college athlete. But you mentioned earlier when we were chatting before we hopped on here about your vision, right? And how your vision drives you, it motivates you, it inspires you. Can you talk to that about that vision, and what does it look like? And then how do you manage to that on a daily or weekly basis?
I'm going to answer the question directly, but first, I want you to understand where I come from and the mindset of a lot of people from where I come from. I love Old Forge, Pennsylvania. I'm so grateful I grew up here. I love the people in the town I'm from. But many of them I recognized at a young age thought that big things were just for other people. They weren't for the people around where we were. And I would say most of the people in the town I grew up in made a good income, modest income, provided for their family, had a great life, did the thing, got through life. And that's great for a lot of people. And most people out there want all they want is that. And I recognize that fully, and that's awesome. But at the same time, Jeff, it was almost the mindset that that was the only way. There's not another way. Either you did that's how you're successful, and anything bigger than that, like that's just not for people from where we are. That's just not it. And as I got older, like I worked really hard as a kid. When I was a little kid playing junior football, Pop Warner football, it's called a lot of areas in the country. There's a weight limit, and I was a little bit of a chubby kid, so I had to go back and like start. I had to work out and like diet when I was probably 10, 11 years old, and this is like the first lesson in leadership I ever learned. At 10 years old, I'd be wearing two hoodies and two pairs of sweatpants, and I'd be running around my neighborhood, and I'd be doing intermittent fasting and only drinking water as a 10-year-old kid. And my dad would be doing it with me in the heat of summer just so I could lose weight to make weight limit and play football. That was the first time I learned hard work means something. And also, if you want to be a good leader, show your people that you'll do what they need to do as well sometimes. So that started there, but then that carried with me through high school athletics, where I was the guy that I always went to the weight room. I always did the things I needed to do, extra running, all those things. And you kind of get labeled by other kids as like, oh, you're a try hard, and what are you trying to prove? And when that mindset's around you, like nobody from here plays football in college, nobody from here does anything extraordinary. It kind of gets ingrained in you. And I just like grew up like, why? But why? Why does it need to be that way? I don't want that. Like, okay, I respect wanting that normal white picket fence life. I don't want normal. I want to see how big and how far I could go. And quite frankly, I want to be the person that I have lived a life that no one in my family, no one in my network has ever lived before. And not just for me, because I want it to be so big that I can now give back to the people I care about and help them live a life that they've never lived, and show them like this is possible. Like you can do this. You have to believe you can first. And there's a book over my shoulder above that one you mentioned, Think and Grow Rich. That book changed my life, man. That in tandem with the 12-week year. I read Think and Grow Rich in 2021 in the winter. So this was my first full year in my career. My first 3 months, I made like $360, and I know the number because I looked at it before. I read that book, and it's all about auto suggestion and priming your subconscious mind, and that anything great that's ever been done in history, it all starts as an idea. So if you can't think something, you can't do it. And it sounds so simple, but a lot of people don't realize this, that you need to think about something and visualize it and have that vision before it will materialize in your life. And by doing that and putting it in your mind, that actually is creating it. So I read that book. I wrote down, I have a sticky note that says, I will make X amount of dollars this year by doing these tactics. And in return for this, I will sacrifice this and give this and be the best for my clients and the best person possible. It's so clear to me how I'm going to do this that I could see it on a platter ready to be transferred to me. And again, at the time, I made $300. So for me to think that the number on this paper that was mid six figures that I well surpassed, and it's not about that, but I had no hope to even be an advisor anymore, never mind to become a top level advisor. And mind you, hit a number in my company that nobody ever did as young as I did. That proved to me how powerful it is to have a vision, commit to it, and focus on that vision. And when you truly believe that something is possible, it is only to the extent that you believe it is. You will never outperform your self-belief.
Yeah, you mentioned before the book, Think and Grow Rich. Chapter 2 is on desire. Those who have read the book, they know. When I recommend books, that's one of the ones that I recommend. And I always say, just read chapter 2 first. Don't go and read chapter 1 or the other. Just read chapter 2 first. And it talks about having the burning desire to succeed and achieve what you want to achieve. I said, after that chapter, if you don't think this is blowing your mind, just forget it. Don't even read the rest of the book. and it's so true what you said. It's like you got to think it, you got to write it, you got to look at it, and that vision has to be so powerful. And you got to connect with that vision. You can't just write it down and put it away and say, okay, let's see what happens. You got to connect with that stuff like daily, weekly, and sometimes you got to make some adjustments because things change, and whatever you want 12 months from now gets here, you got it. And now what's the next vision? Where are we going? And you talked about that the other day about, you don't do reviews, you do, I think you said you do
We we re,
discoveries,
we recalibrate and we do
re-
discovery.
discoveries.
We're always in
Yeah.
discovery.
Talk about that. I thought that was like I mean, I'm 36 years doing what you do, but in a different world, right? And when I heard you say that, I'm like, I talked about that for like another 20 minutes afterwards with the guys that are here. I'm like, we have to discover what people want next. It's not just review where they're at and what's going on. It's what is that discovery? What do they want next? Can you talk about that? I thought that was really powerful.
It's massive. And let's go back to coaching. Simon's the guy that told me about that. Simon's the one that taught me that and said, your clients will not be your clients long if you review. If you're constantly in discovery, diagnose something, design how you're going to fix the diagnosis and deliver that to fix the diagnosis to them to get them in a better position. And now guess what? The next time you talk to them, we have to go back into discovery, because if we don't even know if there's a diagnosis that we're missing here. So we're constantly in discovery, constantly in discovery. And whenever I'm meeting with a client who we've had for, a year, 2 years, 3 years, at least one time a year or even every 6 months, I bring up like, hey man, we talked about what you wanted to do in the past and why we started working together, what your challenges were, what you were trying to achieve. But we need to like dial back in on this because your life has changed. Hey, you had a kid. Hey, you moved. Hey, you're in a new state. You're in a new job. What are we working to? What's really important to you? And then when they tell me, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? And I want to get to the 5 levels of why, because then I could really understand what are your motivations? Why do you care about this? What is driving you? Because when I know that, as a financial advisor, but also I think as a professional in general, anyone you're dealing with, if you can know their deep rooted motivations, that helps you be the best version of yourself for them, because you then know every recommendation or every action that you take to help them get to an outcome. Number one is the outcome they actually want, but number two, it's in line with their values, which is super important.
That's awesome. I love that. The 5 levels of why. Yeah, that's awesome. Let's take discovery now. Let's go back to the college athlete, right? It can't, and I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, if you don't mind. Make you think a little bit here. Not that you're not thinking already. You're doing all, giving us some great stuff here. But if you use that discovery and we use vision about the college athlete, career's coming down to a close, it's over. What advice can you give to a college senior, whatever sport they're playing, it's over, about, you know, how can they discover their next step? How can they think about their vision? And it's so hard. You're a college kid, 22, 23, coming out. Like, it's just so hard to see down the road. They can't see next week, let alone down the road. Can you talk about, what advice you can give to these young men or women about discovering themselves and what their vision could look like post athletics?
It's very hard. And when I was in their shoes, I didn't do it at all. Like I only got exposed to this once I got into financial services. And then when I read Think and Grow Rich, and I only actually put into practice what was in Think and Grow Rich because when I read it, I literally told myself, dude, you've made $300 in 3 months. You suck. You're going to try this. And if it doesn't work, you're in the same position. If it does, it might change your life. So let's see what happens. So, anyways, I think there's a lesson from that for any college kid ending their career. Look, you're 22 years old. You're going to feel like you're in this rush, especially with social media today. Everything's a highlight reel. Everyone's great. These millionaires that are YouTube creators and they're 16 years old. And it's like, I got to catch up. I got to catch up. I got to catch up. You can literally go try something for 3 entire years. It doesn't work out. You gained experience. Maybe you got paid to gain experience. Most likely you did. And you're 25 years old making a pivot and you're still very young. And I'm 26 years old saying this. And I'm saying this because I still feel this today that I know I've done things and I know I want to get somewhere and I have big goals. I have a big vision, but I still feel so behind at times. And I need to realize I'm 26, man. Like I'm 26. And for you graduating college, you're 22. Like really realize that. It's not to discredit you, but it's to say you got time and you can use that time as an advantage. So use it as an advantage to try things, network with people, build relationships with no agenda just for the sake of building the relationship because you don't know what will come later. And you want to know the best thing in the world? Where can you get paid to go learn? Oh, a job, which I think a lot of people overlook that hey, doctors and lawyers go to school 8 years and they're paying to go to school and they don't start making money really till the tail end of it when they're in residency or whatever the technical name for it is. You're 22 coming out of school, you could go get a job, learn skills.
Yeah.
Maybe you take a bet on yourself in an industry that's performance dependent, kind of like I did in financial services. But I told myself, hey, if I do this for a year, for 2 years, I'm 23, I'm 24 at that time. If it doesn't work out, and I could go figure something else out.
That's awesome. Two more questions and we'll wrap it up. Is what's 10 years look like for you? 10 years from now, what's Mando doing?
You know, Jeff, I've been very fortunate that I've built a following on LinkedIn to almost 25,000 people now. And I never anticipated that happening. I started creating there 2 years ago with the intention, hey, maybe I could get an extra 5 or 10 clients every year from this. And great, that'll happen. And it's really grew into a community that follows my stuff and continues to grow my personal brand, quote unquote. I see that continuing to build out. And the reason I'm centering in on this, financial services, I love this industry. I think it impacts people from the people that are working as financial services professionals. But as you know, also the people we work with as clients, you change their lives. And I could sit here and say many stories, but this isn't the time for that right this second. The biggest problem advisors have is they don't have enough people to talk to, and they don't have enough prospects, and they don't have enough people to go help. At the same time, an alarmingly low number of people in America work with an advisor. And if you look at the statistics, credit card debt is at an all-time high. Most Americans can't even cover an unexpected expense of $1,000. These are real problems that are affecting people, not only financially, but that affects your mental health. That affects your life. It affects how you show up with your family, and it affects what your experience throughout your entire life. So I think financially, that's a big thing that can impact people. So back to my entire point here with LinkedIn, that's going to continue to grow. I want to grow that so big that not only I have enough prospects and enough demand coming to me to grow my business, but I want so many to come in that I can't handle it and I can now give it to the other advisors within Mass Mutual and within the firms around us that we partner with, that they can go help these people. And not only can we help more people because there's more awareness around financial services, but more people will actually make it as advisors and provide a life for themselves and their family and the clients they'll help because of that. So big picture vision, like that's where I see things going for me professionally. Personally, I'm engaged to my fiance Mattia. We're going to get married next year in August.
Right.
We want to start a family in the next 5 years. That's something that we'll be doing. And just continuing to travel. We love to travel. We'd love to have a home at the Jersey Shore, like the Avalon, Stone Harbor area. We would love to do that. That's some of the personal stuff and the professional stuff that ties it together.
That's awesome. I guarantee you this, all that's going to happen. I mean, Mondo, with your drive, your work ethic, your commitment to what you're doing, and what's really cool about you, Mondo, is you're not committed just to you. You're committed to helping other people, and the perfect example, when I asked you to come out here to speak to our guys, you're like, no problem. When do you want to do it? Whereas a lot of guys, "Well, I don't know, I don't have the time, I can't get there. There's one reason after another, and you're just willing to give, which everybody can see that, they can feel it, and that's why you're getting what you're getting, which is great.
There's a great quote from Zig Ziglar. You can have everything you want in life if you will just help enough other people get what they want.
Yeah,
And I read that. I think I read that in 2021 as well, early in my career, coincidentally, and thank God I did, because that drilled in me. It just clicked for me, like light
yeah,
bulb moment. I'm like, yeah, like how have you ever heard of someone who went broke from giving? Because I sure haven't. So if I want to create a good life for me, I can just help other people create a great life for themselves. And if I do that, then I'll probably end up okay.
right.
That's how I live, man.
Yeah, the money will just happen,
Yeah.
which is great. So, is there anything else that I haven't asked you yet that you think, those people out there listening need to know?
Man, I don't know. I mean, I think just to like wrap things up, I've been fortunate in 4 years in my career and 26 years of my life. I've done amazing things that, I even surprise myself sometimes, but it comes back to what am I going to believe in? And I credit it to the people I've had around me. My fiance, she's been great. I've been with her literally since high school, and that's been something for me that it taught me commitment. It taught me that when there's issues, you don't just brush things and run away. You tackle those head on, and we've done that, and that's been a huge life lessons for me. I mean, that could be unpacked for hours probably, but there's been her, my parents. Like, I hit the parent lottery. Like, I'm so grateful that I grew up in a nice home, and I didn't have issues at home, and I could, my parents were there to support me, and they'd take me to baseball games and football games, and they'd never miss one. And they wanted me to succeed and really sacrifice part of their own lives to do that, if we're being honest. And beyond that, football coaches in high school and football coaches in college, and then coming into my firm now professionally, and then professional coaches that I've worked with. I've just had so many people throughout the years that I can look at little things that in the moment it might have seemed they impacted my life, impacted my career. One situation led to another. That my any success I have is just a culmination of all of those people dripping on me. And the one thing I could credit myself and thank myself for is to put my ego to the side eventually, because it was there for a while, put it to the side eventually and say, dude, you are only as good as what you accept that you don't know. And when you accept you don't know something, that means there's room to grow for yourself. So lean into that.
And that's awesome. And that's just one big thing is what you're going to continue to do is pay it forward. So Mondo, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your Saturday, to spend with me and all those that are out there listening. And I know there's going to be a lot of athletes out there that are going to listen and they're going to hear this story and they're going to say, hey man, I want to do what that guy's doing. So I appreciate your time and I wish you the best of luck and continued success. And I look forward to having you back soon.
Yeah, appreciate it, Jeff.